The emergency sirens screamed across the massive space station like angry metal beasts. Red lights flashed in every corridor and room of the Galactic Defense Council headquarters. The station hung in space like a giant metal flower, its many arms reaching out toward the stars around planet Kepler 442b. In the central war room, 12 different alien species gathered around a huge circular table made of black metal. The air buzzed with tension and fear. Translators worked overtime as voices mixed together in a chaos of worried sounds. The Vorth delegation stood at the far end of the table. They looked like walking crystal towers, each one nearly 10 feet tall. Their bodies caught the red emergency lights and threw rainbow patterns across the walls. When they spoke, their voices sounded like glass breaking in slow motion. High Commander Tizak was the tallest of the Vorth. His crystal body pulsed with angry red light as he slammed his arm-like appendage against the table. The sound rang out, like a church bell. "The situation is worse than we feared," he announced. His voice filled the room with its strange music. "The Devourers have broken through our defenses at the outer rim. 3 entire star systems have gone completely dark. No signals, no survivors, nothing." Near the table's center, the Threx representatives clicked their mandibles together nervously. They looked like giant insects, but ones that had learned to walk upright and wear uniforms. Their black eyes reflected the emergency lights like tiny mirrors. General Zecht was their leader, his body covered in cybernetic implants that glowed, blue in the dim light. How is this possible? General Zecht's voice buzzed like an angry wasp. "Our intelligence said the Devourers were still years away from breaking our outer defenses." On the opposite side of the table, the Nebulan delegation floated inside their special containment suits. They looked like colored gas trapped in human-shaped glass containers. Admiral Hoosh pulsed orange with agitation, his gaseous form swirling faster and faster inside his suit. "The Devourers adapt faster than we calculated," Admiral Hoosh said. His voice came through speakers on his suit, sounding hollow and distant. "Every weapon we use against them, they learn to defend against. Every tactic we try, they counter within hours." Around the table, other species nodded in agreement. The Bie. Rock-like granite clans shifted their heavy bodies with grinding sounds. The plant-like Verdani rustled their leaf-covered arms. Even the energy beings from the plasma worlds flickered with worry inside their special containment fields. High Commander Tizak's crystal body grew brighter as he continued speaking. "This is why we have called this emergency session. We need the greatest warriors from every species, the most battle-hardened fighters, the most experienced commanders. We cannot afford to send anyone but our very best." One by one, each species began presenting their champions. The Threx brought General Zekate forward first. He stepped into the center of the room, his cybernetic implants whirring softly. Weapon ports opened along his arms, showing glimpses of bioweapons that could dissolve matter at the molecular level. Scars from 100 battles marked his chitinous armor. "General Zecht has won 47 major conflicts," the Threx ambassador announced proudly. "His tactical modifications allow him to process battlefield information faster than any organic mind." The Nebulan delegation presented Admiral Hoosh next. His gaseous form shifted to a deep blue color that meant determination in their culture. Special equipment around his suit began to hum. "Admiral Whoosh can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously," their representative explained. "He has commanded fleets across 17 different realities. His understanding of quantum warfare is unmatched." The presentations continued. The Granite clans brought forward Commander Stonecrusher, whose rocky hide could withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. The Verdani presented General Rootwalker, who could regrow from a single leaf even after apparent death. The Plasma Worlds sent Energy Marshal Brightfire, who could become pure energy and strike from inside enemy ships. Each warrior arrived in full ceremonial armor. Their weapons gleamed under the emergency lights. Their faces were set in expressions of grim determination. They carried themselves with the pride of soldiers who had seen many battles and survived them all. The presentations took nearly an hour. As each species showed off their greatest champion, the atmosphere in the room grew more serious. These were not just soldiers. These were legends, heroes whose names were spoken with respect across the galaxy. Finally, High Commander Tizak called out the last name on his list. "Earth delegation, please present your champion." The room fell completely silent. All the clicking, buzzing, grinding, and humming stopped. Every alien eye, sensor, and detection device turned toward the main airlock. The heavy metal door slid open with a soft hiss. Through the doorway walked a young human woman. She appeared to be in her late 20s, with dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail. She wore a plain gray jumpsuit that looked more like work clothes than military uniform. No armor covered her small frame. No weapons hung from her belt. Readiness. Her right hand, she carried a simple metal thermos. Steam rose from a small opening at the top, carrying the scent of coffee into the war room. She walked calmly to the last empty chair at the table, pulled it out, and sat down. Then she unscrewed the top of her thermos and took a long, slow drink. Every alien in the room stared at her in complete silence. The woman looked around the table, seeming to notice their attention for the first time. She swallowed her coffee and gave them a small, friendly smile. "Hi, everyone," she said in a casual tone. "I'm Lieutenant Commander Park Hana from Earth Defense Force. Sorry I'm a little late. Traffic around the station was pretty heavy." High Commander Tizak's crystal body flickered between different colors as he tried to process what he was seeing. His voice, when he finally spoke, cracked like breaking glass. This is Earth's champion?" Park Hana took another sip of her coffee and nodded. "I'm here for the briefing about the Devourer situation. When do we start discussing the mission details?" General Zacht's mandibles clicked rapidly together. His cybernetic implants whirred as they tried to scan the human woman. "Where is your battle armor, your weapons, your cybernetic enhancements?" Hana looked down at herself, then back at the alien general. "I've got everything I need," she said simply. She held up her thermos. "Coffee helps me think better, and thinking is usually more useful than heavy armor when you're trying to solve problems." Admiral Hush's gaseous form swirled faster inside his containment suit, shifting from orange to a confused purple color. "Human, do you understand what we are facing? The Devourers have destroyed civilizations that stood for millions of years. They consume entire worlds. This is not some routine patrol mission." "I understand," Hana replied calmly. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small tablet device. "I read all the files during the trip here. The Devourers use quantum tunnel attacks, and their ships can regenerate using stellar radiation. Pretty standard adaptive swarm tactics with some interesting technological twists." The room fell silent again. This time, the silence felt different. Less shocked, more thoughtful. High Commander Tizak leaned forward, his crystal body catching the light in new patterns. "You speak of tactics we have not fully considered. How much do you know about the Devourer capabilities?" Hana scrolled, threw information on her tablet while sipping her coffee. "Well, from what I can see in the tactical reports, their main advantage is adaptation speed. But every adaptive system has weak points, usually in the transition phases when they're switching from one configuration to another." She looked up from her tablet and around the table at all the alien warriors in their impressive armor and weapons. "So," she said with the same casual tone she might use to discuss the weather, "when do we deploy? And does anyone else want some coffee? I brought extra." The greatest military minds in the galaxy continued to stare at the small human woman who had just offered to share her coffee while discussing the destruction of worlds. None of them quite knew what to think. The silence in the war room stretched on like a thin wire ready to snap. Every alien commander stared at Park Hana as she calmly finished her coffee. The emergency lights continued flashing red, but somehow the human woman seemed completely unaffected by the crisis atmosphere. General Zickett was the first to break the silence. His cybernetic implants clicked and whirred as he processed what he was seeing. The giant insect-like warrior leaned forward across the table, his black eyes reflecting the emergency lights. "Human," he said, his voice buzzing with disbelief. "Do you truly understand what we face? This is not some training exercise or border patrol mission. The Devourers have consumed 3 entire star systems. Billions of lives lost. Entire civilizations turned to dust." Hannah looked up from her tablet where she had been reading the tactical reports. "I understand the situation is serious," she replied, in the same calm tone she had used since entering the room. "That's exactly why we need to think clearly about solutions instead of just looking scary." Commander Stonecrusher of the Granite Clans shifted his massive rocky body. Each movement sounded like an avalanche in slow motion. "Where are your battle scars, human? Where are the marks of your victories? How can we trust someone who shows no signs of combat experience?" "Battle scars just mean you didn't avoid getting hit," Hannah said simply. She took another sip from her thermos and gestured around the table. "Look, I understand why you're all confused. You expected Earth to send someone who looked like a warrior, someone covered in armor and weapons like all of you." She stood up and walked slowly around the table, looking at each alien champion in turn. "General Zika, your cybernetic modifications are impressive. You can process battlefield data faster than any organic mind. That's useful." The Threx general's mandibles clicked with what might have been pride. Hannah continued walking. "Admiral Whoosh, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously gives you a tactical advantage no one else has. Commander Stonecrusher, your ability to withstand direct plasma cannon hits makes you nearly unstoppable in close combat." She paused next to Energy Marshal Brightfire of the Plasma Worlds. "And you can become pure energy and strike from inside enemy vessels. All of these abilities are genuinely impressive." The alien commanders exchanged glances. This human was showing them proper respect for their capabilities. Maybe she understood the seriousness of the situation after all. But then Hannah continued talking, and her next word surprised them again. "The problem is the Devourers have been studying all of you for years. They know about General Zickett's cybernetic processing speed, so they've developed jamming systems. They know about Admiral Whoosh's dimensional abilities, so they've learned to collapse quantum fields. They know about everyone's special skills because you've been using the same tactics for decades." She walked back to her seat and sat down. "The Devourers adapt to everything they encounter, but they can only adapt to things they've seen before." High Commander Tizak's crystal body pulsed with different colors as he processed this information. "Are you suggesting that Earth's military capabilities are unknown to the Devourers?" "I'm saying that human military thinking is different from everyone else's," Hannah replied. She pulled up a file on her tablet and showed it to the nearest alien. "Commanders, look at our history. Humans have been fighting each other for thousands of years. We've developed ways of warfare that focus on unpredictability, adaptation, and using the enemy's strength against them." General Rootwalker of the Verdani rustled his leaf-covered arms thoughtfully. "Your species fights among itself? This seems inefficient." "Inefficient, maybe, but educational." Hannah scrolled through more files on her tablet. "We learned early that the side with better equipment doesn't always win. Sometimes the side with better ideas wins instead." She looked up at the assembled alien warriors. "Every species here fights the same way you've always fought. You perfect your techniques over centuries. You build better armor and stronger weapons. You become more disciplined and more focused. It's all very impressive." Admiral Whoosh's gaseous form shifted to a curious blue color. "And humans do not follow this approach?" "Humans get bored easily," Hannah said with a small smile. "We're always trying new things. Sometimes those new things don't work, but sometimes they work so well that they surprise everyone. including us. She stood up again and walked to the large viewing window that showed the stars outside the station. The Devourers. Expect you to fight them with discipline and precision and superior technology. They're prepared for that. They've been adapting to that for decades. Turning back to face the room, she continued. But they're not prepared for chaos. They're not prepared for tactics that don't make sense until they work. They're not prepared for someone who shows up to a war meeting with coffee instead of weapons. The room fell quiet again, but this time it was a thoughtful silence instead of a shocked one. High Commander Tezak's crystal body dimmed slightly as he considered her words. You believe that human unpredictability could be an advantage against an adaptive enemy? I think it's our biggest advantage, Hana replied. The Devourers have been winning because they can adapt faster than anyone else can change tactics. But what if we don't use tactics at all? What if we just improvise? General Zek's cybernetic implants whirred as he ran calculations. Improvisation cannot be programmed or predicted, but it also cannot be relied upon for consistent results. Exactly, Hana said, nodding approvingly. The Devourers can't adapt to something that's different every time, and if it doesn't work the first time, we just try something completely different the second time. She walked back to the table and sat down, opening her thermos to refill her cup with coffee. So the question isn't whether I look ready for battle. The question is whether you're ready to try something that might not make sense until it works. Energy Marshal Brightfire flickered brighter inside his containment field. This approach seems dangerous. What if your improvisation fails? Then we try something else, Hana said simply. That's how improvisation works. You keep changing what you're doing until something succeeds. Commander Stonecrusher's rocky face somehow managed to look skeptical. And if we run out of time to keep trying new approaches, then we'll have learned more about the Devourers in a few hours than you've learned in decades of traditional warfare, Hana replied. Either way, we'll be better off than we are now. High Commander Tezak's crystal body began to pulse with a steady rhythm, which other aliens recognized as deep thought. Finally, he spoke. The human presents an interesting perspective. Our current strategies have failed against the Devourers. Perhaps an unpredictable approach has merit. When do we deploy? Hana asked, finishing her coffee and closing her tablet. The fleet launches in 6 hours, High Commander Tezak announced. All champions will command vessels in the combined force. Human Park Hana will be assigned to Earth's vessel Soul's Pride, under Captain Kim Daeho. As the meeting began to break up, the alien commanders continued to steal glances at the small human woman who had challenged everything they thought they knew about warfare. Some looked worried, others looked curious, but all of them wondered if this relaxed human with her thermos of coffee might actually have the answer they had been looking for. Outside the viewing window, stars twinkled peacefully in the darkness, unaware that the fate of entire civilizations might soon depend on the willingness of legendary warriors to trust in chaos instead of order. The combined fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system like a school of metal fish breaking the surface of an invisible ocean. 50 ships from 12 different species hung in the darkness of space, their running lights creating small constellations against the black void. But the beauty of the moment lasted only seconds. Ahead of them stretched a nightmare that made even the bravest warriors pause in shock. Hundreds of Devourer ships filled the space around the dying star at the system's center. Each ship looked like a cross between a machine and a living creature. Dark metal twisted together with pulsing organic components. Tentacle-like appendages reached out from the main hulls, some as long as entire city blocks. The ships were feeding. Energy streams flowed from the dying star directly into the alien vessels. As they absorbed the stellar radiation, the ships grew larger and more complex. What had started as relatively simple craft were evolving into massive war machines right before the Allied fleet's eyes. On the bridge of the Soul's Pride, Captain Kim Dae-ho stood at his command station with calm professionalism. His crew moved around him with quiet efficiency, checking weapon systems and running diagnostics on their equipment. The human ship was smaller than most of the alien vessels, but every surface gleamed with careful maintenance. Park Hana stood near the main view screen, sipping coffee from her thermos and studying the enemy formation with the same casual attention she might give to a weather report. "All units, prepare for standard formation attack." High Commander Tizak's voice crackled over the communication system. His crystal ship, the Resonant Dawn, took position at the center of the fleet. "Primary targets are the outer ring ships. We will break their formation and push toward the core vessels." The other alien ships began moving into their assigned positions. The Threx fighters swarmed out from their carriers like angry insects. The Nebulan ships started charging their dimensional weapons. The massive Granite Clan vessels powered up their siege cannons. "Wait." Hana's voice cut through the chatter. On the communication channels, the fleet slowed its advance. On a dozen different bridges, alien commanders turned to their communication systems in surprise. "Human, this is not the time for delay," General Zecht snapped from his command vessel. His cybernetic implants were already calculating attack vectors and target priorities. "Every moment we wait gives the Devourers more time to adapt to our presence." "That's exactly why we need to think about this differently," Hana replied calmly. She was still looking at the tactical display, but now Captain Kim Dae-ho and his bridge crew were watching her with interest. "Look at their formation," she continued. "The outer ring ships aren't just defensive positions. They're sacrificial units. The Devourers want us to attack them first." Admiral Whoosh's gaseous form swirled inside his containment suit as his ship moved into position. "Of course they are defensive positions. That is how fleet formations work." "No, you're not seeing it," Hana said, pulling up tactical data on her tablet. "Look at the energy flows between their ships. The outer vessels are connected to the inner core by quantum tunnels. When we destroy the outer ships, all that absorbed stellar energy doesn't disappear. It gets transferred directly to the core vessels." She highlighted different parts of the enemy formation on her display. "They're not trying to defend their core ships. They're trying to power them up by letting us destroy the outer ring." Communication channels fell silent for a moment as the alien commanders processed this information. High Commander Tizak's voice came back over the comm, sounding thoughtful. "If this analysis is correct, then a direct assault would only make our enemies stronger." "Exactly," Hana said. "They're counting on us to fight the way we always fight. Disciplined formation attacks against their apparent weak points, but their weak points are actually traps." General Zecht's mandibles clicked rapidly as he ran new calculations. "Then what do you propose, human? We cannot simply retreat." Hana took another sip of her coffee and smiled. For the first time since the fleet had arrived, she looked genuinely excited. "We don't attack their formation at all," she said. "We attack their assumptions." She turned to Captain Kim Dae-ho. "Captain, can you patch me through to all the human vessels in the fleet?" "Of course, Commander Park," Captain Kim replied. He nodded to his communications officer, a young woman named Lee So-hee. "Chief Lee, open channels to all Earth Defense Force ships." Within seconds, Hana was connected to the 5 other human vessels in the combined fleet. Their captains appeared on the main screen: Commander Choi Hyun-woo of the Busan Defender, Captain Nam Ji-young of the Incheon's Hope, and 3 others. "Listen carefully," Hana said to them. "I'm going to explain something that's going to sound completely crazy, but I need you to trust me and follow my lead exactly." The human captains nodded without hesitation. This lack of questioning surprised the alien observers who were monitoring the channel. "The Devourers expect us to attack in formation," Hana continued. "They expect us to focus our fire on obvious targets. They expect us to behave like disciplined military units." She paused to take another sip of coffee. "So instead, we're going to behave like humans who are completely lost and confused. We're going to look like we have no idea what we're doing." Commander Choi Hyun-woo's face showed the first hint of a smile. Organized chaos? Exactly. But not actually organized. Actually chaotic, but with a hidden purpose they won't see until it's too late. Captain Nam Ji-young leaned forward on her screen. What do you need us to do? Hana began outlining her plan in quick, simple terms. As she spoke, the expressions on the human captains' faces changed from confusion to understanding, to something that looked almost like anticipation. Meanwhile, the alien commanders listened in growing bewilderment. The humans plan to attack randomly? Admiral Whoosh asked, his gaseous form shifting to a worried yellow color. They plan to fire at empty space? Energy Marshal Brightfire flickered with confusion. Some of their shots will target their own ship's shields? Commander Stonecrusher's rocky voice rumbled with disbelief. But Hana wasn't finished. She turned to Chief Lee So-hee at the communications station. Chief, I need you to prepare a quantum torpedo with a very specific modification. Can you create a quantum disruption field that will cascade in a controlled pattern? Lee So-hee's fingers flew over her control panel. What kind of pattern, Commander? Something that will interfere with quantum tunnel connections, but only after a 15-second delay. And I need the interference to spread outward from a single point in an expanding sphere. That's actually possible, Chief Lee said, her voice showing professional interest. The quantum mathematics are complex, but manageable. Give me 10 minutes. High Commander T-Zac's crystal body pulsed with rapid color changes as he tried to understand what the humans were planning. Human Park Hana, your strategy makes no logical sense. How can chaos defeat an adaptive enemy? Because chaos isn't really chaos if you understand the underlying patterns, Hana replied. The Devourers can adapt to any tactic they can predict. But they can't adapt to something that looks like complete randomness, but actually follows rules they don't know exist. She finished her coffee and closed her thermos. The key is making it look like we have no plan at all, while actually executing the most complex coordinated attack any of our species have ever attempted. General Zecht's cybernetic implants whirred as he tried to process the implications. And if this fails, then we'll have failed in a way that teaches us something new about the Devourers, Hana said simply, but I don't think it will fail. She turned back to the view screen where the enemy fleet continued feeding from the dying star, growing stronger with each passing moment. Chief Lee, how much longer for that quantum torpedo? 7 more minutes, Commander. Perfect. Hana looked out at the nightmare fleet ahead of them. Time to show the Devourers what human creativity looks like. The alien commanders watched nervously as the human ships began to move into what appeared to be completely random positions, preparing for an attack that none of them understood. The battle began with the fury of 1,000 thunderstorms erupting in the silence of space. The alien ships of the combined fleet opened fire with weapons that could crack planets and boil oceans. Crystal energy beams from the Vorth ships sliced through the darkness like burning swords. Plasma cannons from the Granite clans hurled stars' worth of energy at the enemy. The Threx fighters swarmed around the massive Devourer vessels like angry wasps attacking a bear. But the Devourers were ready for everything. As each alien weapon struck their hulls, the enemy ships changed and adapted. Crystal energy beams that cut through their armor on the first hit, bounced harmlessly off on the second hit. Plasma that burned through their hulls in the first minute became fuel that made them stronger in the second minute. The organic components of the Devourer ships writhed and twisted, growing new defenses faster than the Allied forces could find new ways to attack. Tentacle-like appendages reached out from the enemy hulls and grabbed smaller Allied ships, pulling them close to drain their power. Within 10 minutes of the battle's start, the Allied fleet was losing badly. Their adaptation rate is beyond our calculations, General Zecht reported over the communication system. His cybernetic implants sparked as they struggled to keep up with the changing battlefield. Every attack pattern we use becomes useless within minutes. 3 of our Threx fighters have been consumed, another commander reported. The Devourers absorbed their technology and now they're using our own weapons against us. Admiral Whoosh's gaseous form turned a panicked orange inside his containment suit. We cannot maintain this assault. We must retreat before we lose more ships. High Commander Tizak's crystal body flickered rapidly between different colors as he processed the tactical situation. The battle was following exactly the same pattern as every previous encounter with the Devourers. Initial success followed, by rapid adaptation followed by complete defeat. All ships begin withdrawal to, he started to say. Wait! Park Hana's calm voice cut through the panicked chatter on the communication channels. All human vessels execute pattern Omega-7. The alien commanders watched in amazement as the small human fleet suddenly broke away from the main battle formation. But instead of retreating, the human ships scattered in what looked like complete chaos. The Soul's Pride dove toward the edge of the battlefield and began firing at empty space. The Busan defender spun in a wild spiral while shooting at asteroids. That posed no threat to anyone. The Incheon's Hope started firing at the shield generators of other human ships, though the shots were perfectly calibrated to bounce harmlessly off the energy barriers. The humans have lost their minds, Admiral Whoosh gasped, his gaseous form now pulsing with confused purple light. They are firing randomly at nothing, Commander Stonecrusher rumbled, his rocky face showing something that might have been contempt. The stress of battle has broken their discipline. But Captain Kim Dae-ho and his crew on the Soul's Pride moved with perfect coordination. Chief Lee So-hee worked at her station with intense concentration, making final adjustments to the quantum torpedo that Hana had requested. Pattern Omega-7 is in effect, Commander Choi Hyunwoo reported from the Busan Defender. All random vectors are being followed precisely. Confirmed, Captain Nam Ji-young added from the Incheon's Hope. We're in position for the cascade effect. The Devourers, meanwhile, were as confused as the alien observers. Their adaptive systems tried to analyze the human attack patterns, but there were no patterns to analyze. The random shots seemed to serve no purpose. The scattered formation made no tactical sense. The humans appeared to be wasting their ammunition on empty space and meaningless targets. But Hana was watching everything with the calm attention of someone solving a complex puzzle. She stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, her empty thermos in one hand and her tablet in the other, tracking dozens of variables that no one else could see. Chief Lee, quantum torpedo status? She asked quietly. Ready for deployment, Commander. The quantum disruption field is calibrated to your specifications. Excellent. Hana looked at the tactical display where dozens of energy beams from the human ships were creating a complex pattern of intersections in apparently empty space. Fire the torpedo at coordinates 77 Mark 44. The quantum torpedo launched from the Soul's Pride like a tiny metal fish swimming through an ocean of stars. Compared to the massive energy weapons that the other species were using, it looked almost insignificant. It reached the specified coordinates and detonated in a flash of light that lasted less than a second. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, the impossible began to unfold. Every energy beam that the human ships had fired into apparently empty space suddenly began to bend and converge. The shots that had seemed random and meaningless revealed their true purpose as they curved through space along paths that followed the quantum disruption field. The scattered energy beams met at dozens of precise points throughout the Devourer formation, but they weren't hitting the ships themselves. Instead, they were hitting the invisible quantum tunnels that connected the outer ships to the inner core vessels. The effect rippled outward like cracks spreading through glass. The quantum connections that allowed the Devourers to transfer energy from their sacrificial ships to their core vessels began to destabilize and collapse. One by one, the outer ring of Devourer ships found themselves cut off from the stellar energy they had been absorbing. Their organic components began to writhe in confusion as the power that had been flowing through the quantum tunnels suddenly stopped. Impossible, High Commander Tizak whispered, his crystal body now glowing with amazement instead of panic. The inner core ships, which had been growing stronger as they absorbed energy from the outer vessels, suddenly found themselves trying to process power that was no longer flowing to them. Their adaptive systems, which had been preparing to handle the energy transfer, began to malfunction as they adapted to conditions that no longer existed. Within minutes, the Devourer formation began to fall apart. Ships that had been working together as parts of a single organism found themselves isolated and confused. The quantum tunnels that had made them nearly invincible were now gone, leaving each vessel to fight alone. "How did you calculate those vectors?" Admiral Hoosh asked, his gaseous form now shifting to an odd blue color. "The quantum mathematics required to predict those beam paths should have taken our computers hours to process. We didn't calculate them," Hana replied calmly, watching as the Devourer ships began to retreat toward the edge of the system. "We improvised them." She turned to look at the alien commanders on the communication screen. Each human captain made their decisions based on what felt right in the moment. "We trusted each other to create something that would work, even though none of us knew exactly what the final result would be." General Zekt's mandibles clicked in bewilderment. "You executed a coordinated quantum disruption attack through pure improvisation?" "The improvisation was just the delivery method," Hana explained. "The quantum torpedo provided the framework that made all the improvised shots connect in a useful pattern." Chief Lee Sohee looked up from her station with a proud smile. "The quantum disruption field acted like invisible railroad tracks. No matter where the human ships fired, as long as they fired with the right timing, the beams would follow the quantum paths to the target points. So you created a weapon that made randomness into precision," High Commander Tizak said slowly, his crystal body pulsing with deep thought. "We created a weapon that used human creativity as its guidance system," Hana corrected. "The Devourers can adapt to any tactic they can understand, but they can't understand tactics that are created through inspiration instead of calculation." On the view screen, the last of the Devourer ships disappeared into hyperspace, fleeing from an enemy they couldn't figure out how to fight. The battle was over, and for the first time in decades, the Allied forces had won a complete victory against the Devourers. The celebration lasted exactly 12 minutes. As the last Devourer ship vanished into hyperspace, the alien commanders began congratulating each other over the communication channels. Victory songs echoed from the Threx vessels in high-pitched, buzzing harmonies. The Granite Clan ships fired ceremonial salutes that lit up space with brilliant flashes. Even the usually reserved Vorth allowed their crystal bodies to pulse with satisfied golden light. But Park Hana was not celebrating. She stood on the bridge of the Soul's Pride, staring at the tactical displays with the same intense focus she had shown during the battle. Her coffee thermos sat forgotten on a nearby console. "Commander Park," Captain Kim Dae-ho said, approaching her station. "The enemy fleet has been completely routed. Shouldn't we be pleased with our victory?" "Look at their retreat pattern," Hana replied quietly, highlighting the paths the Devourer ships had taken as they fled. "They're not running away randomly. They're regrouping at the edge of the system." Chief Lee Sohee looked up from her sensor readings, her expression growing concerned. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy buildups from the fled ships. They appear to be preparing for some kind of final attack." The celebration chatter on the communication channels began to fade as other ships started reporting similar readings. "All vessels, this is High Commander Tizak," the Vorth leader's crystal voice rang out over the comm system. "Our sensors are detecting unusual activity from the retreating Devourer forces. They appear to be massing for a counterattack." Admiral Hoosh's gaseous form swirled nervously inside his containment suit as his ship's sensors fed him information. "The energy readings are beyond anything we've seen before. They're preparing to sacrifice their remaining ships in a single massive strike. A kamikaze attack, General Zikat added, his cybernetic implants calculating the implications. They plan to destroy themselves and us in one final assault. The tactical displays showed the truth of their fears. The surviving Devourer ships were linking together into a single massive formation, channeling all their remaining energy into one concentrated weapon system. The energy reading suggested they had enough power to destroy not just the Allied fleet, but the inhabited worlds deeper in the system. All ships fall back to defensive positions, High Commander Tizak ordered. Form up behind the largest vessels and prepare for impact. The alien fleet began moving into a protective formation, with the heavily armored Granite clan ships taking the front positions and the smaller vessels sheltering behind them. Negative. Hana's voice cut through the tactical chatter with startling authority. The fleet movement slowed as commanders across a dozen species stopped to listen. Human, this is not the time for debate, General Zacht said, his voice sharp with urgency. The incoming attack will destroy everything in its path. We must take defensive positions immediately. No, Hana said firmly. We advance, all ships. Move to close formation and prepare for coordinated assault. Have you lost your mind? Admiral Hush's form flashed angry red. You saw what happened in the last battle. The Devourers adapt to everything we throw at them. Now they're desperate and willing to die. Defensive positions are our only option. I am not in command of this fleet, High Commander Tizak reminded everyone. As senior military officer present, I am ordering all vessels to take defensive positions. Actually, Hana said in the same calm tone she had used throughout the crisis, I am in command now. The communication channels fell completely silent. Even the background hum of ship engines seemed to quiet as her words sank in. What did you say? High Commander Tizak's crystal body flickered rapidly between different colors. I said I'm in. Command, Hana repeated matter-of-factly. The previous tactics have failed for decades. My tactics just won the first complete victory against the Devourers in galactic history. Logic suggests that I should be making the tactical decisions from now on. General Zekit's mandibles clicked rapidly in agitation. Human, you cannot simply declare yourself in command. Military hierarchy does not work that way. Military hierarchy based on tradition and rank has been losing to the Devourers for 50 years, Hana pointed out. Military hierarchy, based on proven results, suggests that the person who just solved an unsolvable problem should probably be listened to when the next problem arrives. She turned to Captain Kim Dae-ho. Captain, signal all human vessels to prepare. For Pattern Phoenix. Pattern Phoenix confirmed and ready, Captain Kim replied without hesitation. Across the human fleet, the other captains acknowledged the order with the same calm professionalism. Commander Choi Hyun-woo of the Busan Defender and Captain Nam Ji-young of the Incheon's Hope began coordinating their ship's movements with practiced efficiency. What is Pattern Phoenix? High Commander Tizak demanded. Something we just invented, Hana said simply. Chief Lee, do we have enough quantum disruption torpedoes for a full cascade pattern? We have 6 torpedoes remaining, Chief Lee So-hee reported. That should be sufficient for a Type 7 cascade if we space them correctly. Perfect. Begin preparation sequence. The alien commanders watched in fascination and growing alarm as the human ships began moving in formation toward the massing Devourer fleet instead of away from it. This is insane, Admiral Hush protested. You are leading us all to destruction. I'm leading you to victory, Hana corrected. The Devourers are preparing for a kamikaze attack because they think we'll try to defend against it. They're concentrating all their remaining power into one massive strike because they think we'll give them time to complete it. She pulled up new tactical displays showing the enemy formation. But kamikaze attacks only work if you give the enemy time to build up momentum and pick their target. What if we don't give them that time? High Commander Tizak's crystal body pulsed with rapid calculations. You plan to attack them while they are preparing their strike, but they will still have enough power to destroy us even in an incomplete state. They'll have enough power to destroy us if we attack them the way they expect to be attacked, Hana agreed. But they won't have enough power to destroy us if we attack them in a way that turns their own energy against them. She looked around. The bridge at Captain Kim Dae-ho and his crew, all of whom were working with calm determination to implement her orders. The Devourers are linking all their ships together into one massive weapon system, she explained. That makes them incredibly powerful, but it also makes them incredibly vulnerable to the right kind of disruption. What kind of disruption? Energy Marshal Brightfire asked, his plasma form flickering with curiosity despite his concern. The kind that makes their own weapon explode in their faces instead of firing at us, Hana said with a slight smile. She turned back to the communication channels where dozens of alien commanders were listening with growing amazement. Here's what we're going to do, she began, outlining a plan that was simultaneously more complex and more simple than anything they had heard before. As she spoke, the expressions on the alien faces changed from skepticism to understanding to something that looked almost like awe. By the time she finished explaining Pattern Phoenix, even the most traditional military minds in the fleet were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something unprecedented in galactic warfare. This human thinks in ways that no logical mind should be able to follow, Commander Stonecrusher rumbled admiringly. And yet her logic is perfect once she explains it, High Commander Tezak admitted, his crystal body now glowing with steady admiration instead of confused fear. All ships, Hana announced over the fleet communication system, advance to attack. Positions. We have about 8 minutes before the Devourers complete their weapon system. That's more than enough time to show them what happens when humans get creative under pressure. As the combined fleet moved forward under human leadership for the first time in galactic history, every alien commander found themselves following orders from someone who had arrived at the War Council with nothing but coffee and an idea that sometimes the best way to win a fight is to think about it differently than anyone else ever has. 3 hours after the Devourer fleet vanished into cosmic dust, Park Hana sat in the observation lounge of the Soul's Pride, sipping fresh coffee and watching the rescue ships tend to the few Allied vessels that had suffered minor damage. Through the large viewing windows, the stars looked peaceful and ordinary, as if they had not just witnessed the most decisive military victory in galactic history. Captain Kim Dae-ho found her there, staring out at space with the same calm expression she had worn throughout the entire crisis. "Commander," he said, settling into a chair beside her. "The alien commanders are requesting a meeting. They want to understand what happened during the final attack." "What happened is that we won," Hana replied simply. "Pattern Phoenix worked." "Exactly as planned. Yes, but they want to understand how. Admiral Hoosh keeps asking about the quantum mathematics. General Zacht wants to know how we calculated the cascade timing. High Commander Tezak is trying to figure out how we turned the Devourer's own weapon against them." Hana took another sip of coffee and smiled slightly. The mathematics weren't that complicated once you realized that the Devourers had to maintain quantum coherence across their entire linked formation. Disrupt the coherence at the right points, and their combined weapon system becomes an uncontrolled explosion instead of a directed attack. And the timing? We use their own energy buildup as the timing mechanism. The more power they channeled into their weapon, the more unstable their quantum links became. We just had to wait for the right moment and then give them a little push in the wrong direction. Captain Kim Dae-ho nodded thoughtfully. "The alien commanders are also asking about the command structure going forward. They seem to think you should be leading more than just this battle." "Do they?" High Commander Tezak specifically asked if you would be interested in a permanent position with the Galactic Defense Council. Hana finished her coffee and set the empty cup aside. "I suppose we should go talk to them." The meeting took place in the same war room where the crisis had begun, but the atmosphere was completely different now. The emergency lights had been replaced with normal illumination. The tension and fear were gone, replaced by something that felt almost like reverence. The alien commanders stood as Hana entered the room, a gesture of respect that would have been unthinkable hours earlier. She still wore the same gray jumpsuit and carried the same thermos, but now everyone looked at her with genuine admiration instead of confusion. "Commander Park," High Commander Tezak began, his crystal body glowing with warm golden light. "We owe you our gratitude, and we owe you an apology." For what? For doubting that Earth had sent the right person, for expecting you to look like a warrior instead of recognizing that you were a warrior. General Z's-Kate stepped forward, his cybernetic implants gleaming in the light. "Your tactics saved not just our fleet, but the entire inhabited worlds of this system. Billions of lives exist because you understood something that none of us could see." "I just approached the problem differently," Hana said modestly. "Sometimes that's all you need." Admiral Whoosh's gaseous form pulsed with respectful blue light. "We have been fighting the Devourers for 50 years with traditional military thinking. In one day you showed us that traditional thinking was exactly what was keeping us from winning. The Devourers adapted to everything we knew how to do." Hana agreed. "So we had to do things we didn't know how to do. That made it impossible for them to adapt." Commander Stonecrusher's rocky face somehow managed to express admiration. "You turned our greatest weakness into our greatest strength. Our inability to predict your tactics became the reason your tactics worked." Energy Marshal Brightfire flickered brightly inside his containment field. "We have a proposal for you, Human Park Hana. I'm listening." High Commander Tezak stepped forward and gestured to the head of the conference table where he usually sat. "The Galactic Defense Council would like to offer you the position of Supreme Tactical Commander. You would be responsible for coordinating defense against all future threats to our civilizations." Hana looked around the room at the assembled alien leaders, then walked slowly to the chair they were indicating. She sat down and placed her thermos on the table in front of her. What would this position involve exactly? "You would have command authority over all military forces when facing threats that require coordinated response," High Commander Tezak explained. "You would have access to the resources of 12 different species, and you would have the freedom to develop new tactical approaches without being constrained by traditional military doctrine. Basically, you want me to keep doing what I just did, but on a larger scale?" "That is correct." Hana opened her thermos and poured herself a fresh cup of coffee. As the aroma filled the room, she considered the offer carefully. "Will I still be allowed to bring coffee to strategy meetings?" The alien commanders exchanged glances, then General Zekt's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Commander Park, after today you may bring whatever you wish to strategy meetings. If coffee helps you think the way you think, then coffee will be provided at every meeting. And I'll have the authority to implement tactics that don't make sense to anyone else?" "Your tactics made perfect sense," Admiral Whoosh pointed out. "We simply lacked the perspective to understand them initially." "Fair point." Hana took a sip of her coffee and nodded. "All right, I accept the position, but I have some conditions." "Name them." "First, I want Chief Lee So-hee promoted to Director of Quantum Weapons Research. Her work with the Cascade torpedoes was brilliant, and we're going to need more innovations." "Like that." "Agreed." "Second, I want Captain Kim Dae-ho and the other human ship captains integrated into the command structure as senior tactical advisors. They proved they can execute complex improvised strategies under pressure." "Also agreed." "Third, I want to establish a new training program that teaches all species to think tactically the way humans do. Not to replace your existing military doctrines, but to supplement them with creative problem-solving approaches." High Commander Tezak's crystal body pulsed with interest. "You believe other species can learn human-style tactical thinking?" "I think everyone can learn to be more creative. Under pressure. It just takes practice and the willingness to try things that might not work." She stood up from the chair and walked back to the viewing window. Outside, the stars twinkled peacefully, but now they seemed to hold less threat than they had before. "The universe is full of problems we haven't encountered yet," she said thoughtfully. "The Devourers were just one threat among many. If we want to protect our civilizations, we need to be ready for anything." "And how do we prepare for anything?" Commander Stonecrusher asked. Hana turned back to face the assembled alien leaders, her expression serious but confident. "By staying flexible, by staying creative, by remembering that the best way to solve an impossible problem is to approach it like it's not impossible at all." She picked up her thermos and headed toward the door. "Our next meeting is tomorrow, at 0800. I'll bring the coffee and you bring me reports on whatever new crisis needs solving." As she left the room, the alien commanders remained standing in respectful silence. Through the viewing window, they watched the human ships of the fleet moving in their characteristic patterns of organized chaos, no longer seeming random or confused, but instead looking like the future of galactic defense. High Commander Tezak was the first to speak. Note for the official record: when dealing with humans, expect the unexpected. And when the unexpected works better than anything else we have tried, follow their lead without question. Outside in the corridor, Hana walked toward the shuttle, bay that would take her back to the Soul's Pride. She had reports to read, strategies to develop, and coffee to brew. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But for the first time in 50 years, the galaxy had a defender who was ready for problems that didn't have traditional solutions. The universe was about to discover what happened when humans were put in charge of keeping everyone safe. It was going to be interesting.